You ever notice how strange money feels once you finally start taking it seriously? Like, there was a time when you thought making more money would solve everything. You imagined that once you got a stable job, started saving consistently, and became responsible with money, life would finally feel financially secure. But then reality hits. You work longer hours, your income increases a little, you cut unnecessary spending, maybe you even start investing, and somehow you still feel stuck in the exact same place. Every month feels like a cycle. Salary comes in, bills go out, rent disappears, groceries get more expensive, unexpected expenses show up, and suddenly your account looks almost the same as it did before payday. And that's the frustrating part nobody talks about. From the outside, you're doing everything correctly. You're not reckless. You're trying. But financially, it still feels like running uphill with weights attached to your legs. Here's the thing. The beginning of building wealth feels painfully slow, and most people quit mentally long before compounding finally starts working in their favor. My name is Demas, and I spend way too much time thinking about money. If you're someone who feels stuck financially, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Look, this video is not about getting rich overnight. I'm not going to sell you a fantasy where you make $1 million in 6 months trading crypto from your bedroom. Because honestly, that kind of content is exactly why so many people feel financially broken today. Social media has convinced people that wealth should happen fast. That if you're not making massive money by your late 20s, somehow you're already behind in life. But real wealth usually looks much more boring than people expect. It's slow, repetitive, sometimes frustrating, and for a long time, it feels like nothing is happening at all. That's why so many hardworking people eventually give up. Not because they're lazy, but because the process feels emotionally unrewarding in the beginning. And once you understand why that happens psychologically and mathematically, your entire relationship with money starts to change. You've probably heard the same financial advice repeated over and over again your entire life. Spend less than you earn. Invest consistently. Avoid debt. Just save more money. And technically, none of that advice is wrong. The problem is that most financial advice completely ignores what real life actually feels like for the average person. Because saving money sounds simple when someone online is already financially comfortable. But when you're trying to survive rising rent, expensive groceries, transportation costs, insurance, debt payments, and unexpected emergencies, just save more starts sounding disconnected from reality. Here's what most people don't realize. The early stage of wealth building is brutally difficult because every dollar still depends on your time and energy. You are trading hours of your life for money, and after taxes and expenses, there's often very little left to actually build wealth with. That's why the beginning feels so frustrating. You're not only fighting bad habits, you're fighting math, inflation, stress, and the cost of modern life all at the same time. This is where money starts behaving in a way most people completely misunderstand. Let's say two people both invest their money and earn the exact same annual return of 10%. Sounds fair, right? But here's the difference. One person has $10,000 invested, while the other has $1 million. The first person earns around $1,000 in growth that year. The second person earns roughly $100,000 without working extra hours, without asking for a raise, and without sacrificing more time. Same percentage, completely different reality. And this is the moment where wealth starts to feel unfair. Because in the beginning, your effort matters more than your investments. Every extra dollar still comes from labor. But eventually, if you stay consistent long enough, your investments begin generating larger amounts of money than your actual monthly contributions. Now you might be thinking, so the hardest part is really just the waiting? Honestly, yes. Because compounding feels invisible for years before it suddenly starts looking dramatic. And most people quit during the invisible phase. Here's something most people never realize about money. Financial decisions are rarely logical. People love to think they're rational with money, but in reality, emotions quietly control almost everything. That's why someone can fully understand investing is important and still spend money impulsively 5 minutes later. Behavioral economists call this present bias. Your brain naturally values immediate rewards more than future benefits. A new phone, expensive dinner, or impulse purchase gives you instant emotional satisfaction. Investing that same money gives you basically nothing emotionally in the moment. No dopamine, no excitement. Just delayed results your brain struggles to care about. And then there's loss aversion, which is even more dangerous. Humans feel losses more intensely than gains. Losing $1,000 emotionally hurts far more than gaining $1,000 feels good. That's why people panic during market crashes. They stop thinking long-term and start reacting emotionally. Look, the biggest enemy of wealth building usually isn't low income. It's emotional inconsistency. Because compounding only works if you stay invested long enough to experience it. Now let's talk about one of the biggest financial debates people constantly struggle with. Should you invest your money or focus on paying off debt first? And honestly, this is where personal finance becomes more emotional than mathematical. Because people want one simple, universal answer. But money doesn't work that way. Not all debt is equal. If you have high-interest credit card debt charging 20% or even 25% annually, aggressively paying that off is usually the smarter financial decision. Why? Because eliminating guaranteed losses is often better than chasing uncertain investment returns. But low-interest debt is different. For example, if someone has a mortgage locked in at 3% interest while their investments historically return 8 to 10% annually over the long term, paying off the house early may not actually maximize wealth mathematically. Here's the thing. Personal finance is deeply psychological. Some people sleep better knowing they owe nobody anything. Others prioritize maximizing long-term growth. Neither approach is completely wrong, but wealthy people understand something most people don't. Strategic leverage can accelerate wealth when used carefully instead of emotionally. A lot of people believe their financial problems would disappear if they simply made more money. And to be fair, increasing your income absolutely helps. It gives you more flexibility, more breathing room, and more opportunities. But here's what most people don't realize. High income alone does not automatically create wealth. Because wealth is not determined by how much money comes in. It's determined by how much money stays and continues growing over time. This is why you constantly hear stories about people making six figures while still living paycheck to paycheck. The moment their income increases, their lifestyle increases with it. Better apartment, nicer car, more subscriptions, more convenient spending, more expensive habits disguised as rewarding yourself. This is called lifestyle creep, and it quietly destroys long-term wealth building. Look, there's nothing wrong with enjoying your money. The problem is when your spending grows at the same speed as your income, because if every raise immediately turns into higher expenses, you never create investing power. And investing power is what eventually creates freedom. Wealthy people understand this deeply. They focus less on looking rich and more on owning assets that continue producing income long after the original work is finished. So if you feel financially stuck right now, the question becomes, what should you actually focus on first? Because most people overcomplicate money. They spend hours watching investment videos, trying to predict stock prices, or searching for the perfect strategy, while ignoring the fundamentals that matter far more in the beginning. First, create financial margin. That means reducing high-interest debt, controlling unnecessary recurring expenses, and increasing your income whenever possible. Because without margin, every unexpected expense becomes a financial emergency, and emergencies destroy consistency. Second, automate your investing. Here's the thing. Motivation is unreliable. People feel disciplined when they're inspired, but real life gets stressful fast. Automation removes emotion from the process. You invest before you have time to overthink it. Third, focus heavily on increasing your earning power. Early in life, your skills and income growth often matter more than trying to squeeze an extra 2% return from investments. A higher income creates more investing capacity, which accelerates compounding later. And finally, understand this. Boring financial habits usually outperform exciting financial decisions over the long run. When people say, the first million is the hardest, they're not just talking about the number itself. They're talking about the phase of life where progress feels painfully invisible. The stage where you're putting in effort every single day, sacrificing short-term comfort, trying to stay disciplined, and yet the results still feel small compared to the energy you're giving. And honestly, that's why most people quit. Not because they're incapable of building wealth, but because the beginning feels emotionally unfair. You save money and still feel broke. You invest consistently and barely notice growth. Meanwhile, other people online appear to get rich instantly, which makes your own progress feel even slower. But here's the thing. Wealth building is supposed to feel slow in the beginning, because early on you're not really seeing the full power of compounding yet. You're building the foundation, you're building the engine before momentum finally arrives. And eventually, if you stay consistent long enough, something changes. Your investments begin growing faster than your actual contributions. Your assets start producing income on their own. Money slowly stops depending entirely on your labor. That's the moment the game changes completely.